This happened during the summer before my sophomore year in college. At that time, I was doing a lot of research for a place I could live during the coming school year that was close to campus. I found multiple good-looking apartments, but all of them were way out of my budget. I quickly figured out that if I wanted to live close to campus, I would need a roommate that could help pay each month's rent. I posted an ad on Craigslist explaining my situation, hoping someone would be interested. Not even an hour after I posted the ad, I got a response. Apparently, it was some older lady in her 70s. I was kind of expecting it to be another student from my university, but I figured it didn't really matter. As long as they were willing to pay half of the rent, I didn't really care. Plus, I didn't get any further responses in the next week, so I took the one opportunity one was given. Fast forward to the start of the school semester, and the two of us moved in. She introduced herself as Wilfred. She was short and had white hair. Although a little quiet, she seemed nice. I figured we'd get along fine, so I wasn't too worried about the coming months. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw her that much. We had the occasional small talk conversation when we were both in the kitchen, but that was about it. For the most part, she would spend all her time in her bedroom. Occasionally, while I was watching TV in the living room at night, I would hear this high-pitched giggling coming through the walls. The first few times it happened, I just assumed she was on her phone or something. But then I realized I never actually heard her talking. It was just her giggling. I couldn't imagine what she was doing. Over time, things just kept getting weirder. For example, she would start coming out of her room for no other purpose than to watch me. She would stand in the kitchen or hallway just looking at me while I watched TV or made myself dinner. Needless to say, I was getting more and more uncomfortable around her. One night, I woke up at around 2 a.m. to the sound of slight knocking on my bedroom door. Not knocking like trying to get my attention, but slow, soft, and barely audible knocking. I yelled out Wilfred's name, and right as I did, the knocking stopped. I knew it was her because shortly after, I heard her same giggling followed by footsteps walking back to her room. I'd be lying if I said this didn't freak me out. I didn't have a lock on my door, so nothing was stopping her from coming into my room while I was sleeping. I didn't sleep at all the rest of that night. I had planned on confronting her about this situation the next day, but she never left her room once. Come night again, I decided to move my desk in front of my door as a makeshift barricade because, again, I didn't have a lock on my door and I did not feel comfortable having nothing stopping her from entering my room. 3 hours later, I woke up to the sound of my desk being hit by my door from someone attempting to open it. It was Wilfred. I could see her eye peeking through the crack of the slightly open door. Before I could even say anything, she started screaming and banging on my door. My desk started to give way, so I got out of bed and held the door closed myself. The screaming and banging went on for 2 more minutes. Once it finally stopped, I got up and called the police. When they arrived, I opened the door to my bedroom and my heart dropped. Every single one of the knives from our kitchen had been stabbed into the door. I was absolutely horrified, but I tried to compose myself. I briefly explained the situation to the 2 officers that arrived. I also told them which room Wilfred was in. She would provide a struggle in being detained, but they would ultimately take her away. The next month, I moved to another apartment, this time with some actual students from my university. I still don't understand what made Wilfred do what she did. My best guess is she had some severe untreated condition she wasn't on medication for, but then again, maybe not. Maybe she seriously intended to use those knives on me in my sleep. But because I took the precaution of pushing my desk in front of my door, I luckily didn't have to find out. This experience happened to me when I was only 9 years old. Being that it was so long ago, I don't remember every small detail, but I'll do my best to keep everything as accurate as possible. Back then, I lived in a considerably remote area in the US. Neighboring houses were a good half-mile apart. Therefore, while my family had met a couple of our neighbors, many of them were complete strangers. This included the resident of the house to the left of ours. I don't remember his name, but it was an elderly man that lived there. He was creepy, to say the least. All of the windows on his house were spray painted so that no one could see inside, and his whole yard was completely overgrown. I know all this because every Monday through Friday, I had to walk past his house to get home from school. Every time I did this, the man would either be standing on his porch watching me or trying to make conversation with me as I walked by. It got to the point where I dreaded walking home from school just because I'd have to walk past him. But this wasn't even the worst of it. Maybe once or twice a month, the guy would make the half-mile walk to our house in the middle of the night. He would then shine a flashlight into the window of my room. I knew it was the same guy too because one of the times, I witnessed him walking down the road towards our house. Looking back, this was 100% extremely alarming behavior, but at the time, I thought the best way of handling it was just to ignore it. Therefore, I didn't tell my parents about it. I also remember reasoning that my bedroom was on the second floor, so it's not like he was able to see much of inside my room anyway. Skip to a summer night in that same year, and I was once again woken up by the light of a flashlight shining in my room. This time, it was followed by a subtle thud sound against the wall. It felt like my heart had stopped. The only thing running through my mind in that moment was how it sounded exactly like a ladder being propped up against the side of the house. Not long later, my suspicions would be confirmed. A knocking sound rang out from the glass of the window. I looked over and was met with the smiling face of the man gesturing me to open the window. But no. I screamed and ran to my parents' bedroom. I desperately explained to them how the neighbor was outside my window. They went in my room, but of course, he was gone by that point. The worst part is they didn't even believe me, chalking it up to me seeing things. Therefore, the police were never called. But even now, as an adult, I know exactly what I saw. I try not to think about the intentions he had towards my 9-year-old self. I never saw him again after that. In fact, not even a week after the occurrence, his house had a for sale sign up next to it, which to me serves as further proof that it was him. I've lived in many different places since then, and not one neighbor comes even slightly close to how creepy that man was. About 3 months ago, I moved into an apartment with 2 other women so I could attend college. There's a list of things that make the building we live in not that great. For example, most apartment rooms face the corridor where people from the same floor as you will constantly walk left and right to get in or out of the building. So if you keep your windows open, anyone pacing outside can see into your room. But considering I spend most of my time at college, and the girls I live with and most of the neighbors are really nice, the things on that list don't really bother me that much. A few nights ago, while getting ready to go to bed, I could hear music playing from somewhere, mostly pop songs from the 2000s. Since we live in a student-friendly city full of frat houses and the like, I thought nothing of it. There were probably a bunch of parties going on, and the sound was coming from one of them. Or maybe it was just some drunk friends listening to it on the street. I got into bed and let a random video play on my phone so I could fall asleep, as I often do. But as I was starting to doze off, I started to hear drilling noises. At first, I thought I was just sleepy and hearing things, or maybe it was coming from my phone. But I paused the video and listened closely. There was definitely someone using a drill somewhere nearby. I got up and walked around the apartment, feeling confused. It was around 10:30 p.m., so there was no way that someone could be working still. The sound was louder at my bedroom window, so I opened it to check and quickly realized that it was coming from the neighboring apartment, the one that's closest to my window. At that moment, I realized that music was also coming from there. No one lives in that specific apartment, so my confusion only grew. But then I figured maybe someone had planned to rent it, talked it over with the landlord, and he ordered for something in it to be fixed. Still, the fact that they were doing it so late into a Thursday felt really strange. I went back to trying to sleep, but they wouldn't stop making noise. I was texting a friend and eventually started complaining about it, sending him audios and even a video directed at the window that all the noise was coming from. He said I should call the police because there was no way it was legal for someone to be doing this, especially in a building full of apartments. I decided against it since I just wanted to get some rest, and it was already past midnight by then. I forced myself to sleep through the drilling sounds, but a little past 1 o'clock in the morning, I woke up again, this time to hammering. Feeling stressed, but not enough to take action just yet, I tried to sleep once more, only to wake up again. This time, I didn't even check what time it was. I was totally fed up, so I just put on a robe and made my way to confront whoever it was. The window to the apartment was open, so I decided to talk to those people from there. The window was located above the stairs, though, so I would have to go down a few steps to get into view, and I'd look even shorter being seen from there. But that was the last thing on my mind. As soon as I got to the window, I felt most of the courage leave me. In that room, there were 4 men who all seemed to be around their 30s or 40s, and they all stopped whatever they were doing to look at me. Now only the song coming from the radio could be heard, and somehow it felt chilling to have all those other noises stop so abruptly. Even though that's everything I wanted just seconds earlier, I definitely didn't want to be the one thing these 4 men were focused on. Another thing that bothered me, but I didn't think about until the next day, was those men's peculiar choice of music. It just felt creepy to realize that middle-aged men were listening to stuff that teenagers or even preteens would be listening to. Anyway, none of them looked shocked to see me. They just had puzzled looks. Remembering why I was there in the first place, I said, "Excuse me, it's pretty late and most people here have work early in the morning. If it's not too much to ask, can you guys do this some other time?" Now, mind you, I'm a pretty short and puny 19-year-old who didn't even think to put on something other than a robe. So when 2 of those 40-something-year-old men came to the window and towered over me, looking up and down at my body almost like predators, I froze up and felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. They were both sweaty and had their mouths agape, and one of them had a hammer that looked quite heavy in his hand. They started smiling in a sick, twisted way, and I felt a sudden urge to throw up. Extremely unsettled, I started slowly making my way back to my apartment, not taking my eyes off the men, feeling like they might try to grab me. When I got to the last step of the stairs and close enough to the window, as soon as I was out of their view, I dashed to my front door, got inside, and locked it. One of the girls who lives with me was out of town that night, and I presumed the other one was asleep since she hadn't seen my text on our group chat asking them if anyone had moved into that apartment. I got back into my room and didn't hear any tools again. In reality, even the radio seemed to have been turned off. I wasn't really sure how to feel about that because now I wasn't angry, just disgusted and creeped out. I know I should have called the cops by then, but I was just too stressed to deal with that any longer. Checking the time, it was about 2:15 now. I got into bed again, tricking myself into thinking I wasn't scared, just craving some sleep. Eventually, I passed out. I woke up in the middle of the night again. This time it was around 3 o'clock, and I could hear no sounds coming from the apartment. Everything was quiet, and that quickly started to bother me. It was too quiet. I had to have heard or felt something in order to wake up. The silence was making me uneasy, and I had a feeling that someone might have been on the other side of my closed window. I tried not to think about it, but I couldn't get a peaceful sleep after that. The next morning, as I was going out, I went past the same window and noticed that it was closed. It was as if this previous night had never even happened. But I asked the girl who was home with me if she heard anything. She said she had woken up several times during the night but couldn't get up and do something about it due to sleep paralysis. Either way, that confirmed I wasn't delusional. Those people really were there. But then how did they have the keys to the building and that apartment? Why did it seem like they didn't want to be seen during the day? What were they thinking of doing to me or maybe any passerby? It's been a week now, and thankfully I haven't seen those men again. Still, I have no idea who they were or what they were doing, and I'm honestly scared to even think about the possibility that they might come back or still be lurking around. My childhood was normal and nothing out of the ordinary. Two middle-class, hard-working parents just getting by in a nice city, and then of course, me and my little brother. He's 6 years younger than me and he was at my grandma's house when this happened. My mom was at work, working a double shift, and my father was also working. He was a truck driver, so oftentimes he would spend weeks away from the house. My mom also worked a lot to cope with the fact that my father was always gone. I think it made us all a little bit sad sometimes, but really, our family was very close and we always had a great time together when we were able to finally hang out. Sometime during the night, it wasn't too late yet but definitely starting to get dark. My mom wasn't going to be home for a few more hours, and I was getting pretty bored with nothing to do. I was pacing back and forth through the house, just trying to figure out how to cure my boredom. I sat down on the couch and began looking for something to watch on TV, but nothing was catching my eye. Shortly after, I went and grabbed my PS4 from my bedroom so I could play Madden football out in the living room since the TV was twice as big as mine. As I was hooking up my PlayStation, I felt something weird inside. As soon as I looked up, there was a face smothered in the window right in front of me, staring directly at me. I froze and screamed. Then the man also started screaming. He started yelling for help and to let him inside, just over and over. I had no idea who he was or what he was doing, but he was practically begging and screaming at the top of his lungs. I couldn't move a muscle because I was just so scared. Sounds weird, but I almost let him in despite me being that scared. I was just unsure of what to do. He was a big scary man, but he appeared to be in danger. Thankfully, my mom pulled into the driveway as this was happening. I was so relieved to see her, but also terrified that the man might try to hurt her. He stopped like a deer in headlights, and my mom yelled at him to leave, and he did. Thankfully, my mom called the cops when she got inside. When they showed up, the man was sitting across the street on the curb in front of a foreclosed house. The cops found him there and asked him questions. He stuck with his story, though, and said that a group of men in ski masks tried to kidnap him and that they beat him senseless. For some reason, I just didn't believe that. The cop didn't really seem to either, to be honest, but there was nothing the officer could do technically. We later found out that the man was our new neighbor, and he had just bought that house that was foreclosed right across from us. It was a good thing that my mom showed up like an hour before I expected her to that night. That guy still lives next to my parents, and I lived there for a few more years after this incident. He never necessarily bothered us again after that, but man, he was a creeper. We had to live by his word and take what he said as the truth. Even though it seemed unlikely, we had no choice but to accept it. Nothing outlandish happened with him after this, but there were times I was very uncomfortable by his presence. He used to smile and wave at me whenever I walked past his house, and he always seemed to be outside watching when I got off the school bus. There were also times I heard him having full-on conversations with himself, and I swear I even saw him hitting himself in the head while doing so a few times. He liked to randomly scream in the middle of the night like bloody murder. There was definitely something wrong with him, so we always did our best to keep our distance. My dad really disliked him, probably even more than my mother and I. Violence really was not a thing in our neighborhood, and I mean that literally. So his story was just weird. The last thing I want to mention is when I saw his face the first time. He wasn't cut up or bleeding like he was when the police found him. I genuinely believe he did that to himself to make himself look like a victim. It sounds crazy, but I know there are people out there crazy enough to do that. One day when I was only 17 or so, my older sister and I were hanging outside together in the backyard. Our mom was probably upstairs reading or cleaning or something. My dad wasn't there, and I don't know where he was, probably work or something. I was on my phone, just scrolling through Instagram, lying down on the trampoline. My sister Ava was on the swing set, probably just doing the same thing I was doing. We would occasionally say something to each other about the videos we saw on our For You page, and we would send them to each other and laugh or whatever. Until we were interrupted by our neighbor Bella. We weren't super close with her, but my parents were, and my mother and she got along very well. "Hey guys, come here," she said, standing in her backyard where the fence met the middle of our property lines. We confusingly walked over to her as we had no idea what she wanted, but we knew to respect our elders, so we had to see what she was calling us for. She told us that we needed to go inside and get our mom and that she already called the police. What are you talking about?" my sister asked. "Just trust me. No time to explain right now. Please, just do as I say, guys," said Bella. "You guys are in danger. Run," she said. "Someone dangerous is lurking around your front yard." We reluctantly but also quickly scattered inside after that. We told our mom, and she looked outside, and there was a man on our front doorstep. I didn't recognize him at first as his head was shaved completely bald, but it was our old neighbor. Long story short, a few weeks before this, our neighbor was arrested for killing his wife and daughter, which I didn't know at this point, by the way. I'll get back to that later. My mom saw who it was and ordered us to run up to her room and to lock the door and to only open it if she asks, so we did. We were terrified, but we had to listen to our mom. We ran upstairs and we were waiting. My sister was crying, and I was trying to calm her down. Just by how freaked out Mom was, we both knew something was very wrong, and we were dying to know what was happening. After a few more minutes, our mom screamed and we heard glass shattering. Luckily, she was close to the stairs already and she was able to get to the room with us before the man grabbed her. We locked the door and put a dresser in front of it to buy us some time. This man was screaming like nobody's business that he was going to kill us and pounding on the door for over 5 minutes. Suddenly, it stopped. We heard police sirens in the distance and the man tried to run away. The cops almost had a shootout with him, but after some screaming and threatening, he finally subdued and was taken back to prison. So, this guy we're talking about is named Brian. He was charged with at least 2 counts of first-degree murder for killing his family. Like I said earlier, it was said that he escaped prison about 2 hours before this, and he wanted to come back to get revenge on my family. He was convinced that my father was the reason he got arrested. Brian thought he was going to walk away scot-free for killing his family, but he was under the impression that my dad snitched him out somehow. I'm not sure why he thinks that, as I don't know the whole story. My father won't talk to me about it, not that it matters anyway. I guess my mom and dad didn't tell me or my sister about what happened next door at first, but they said they were planning on it soon. They just didn't want us to freak out, supposedly. But that's about all I can get out of my dad about everything. Not even my mom knows the full story, unless she's lying to us. My parents probably thought there was no urgency to tell us what happened next door since he was locked away in prison at the time. But somehow, he escaped and was looking for revenge. Hopefully, they have him under control in there this time. It was personal, and he escaped just to try and murder us.